All righty, yeah, today we're going to talk about resiliency and communication. Just a quick overview. As you know, the U.S. is experiencing more severe and frequent natural disasters over the past several years. With this increase in disasters impacting the customers served by both the communication and electric sectors, a cross-sector effort was initiated to improve communications before, during, and after disasters. The communications sector has been working with the electric sector on multiple initiatives to help improve operational information sharing, planning, training, and exercises to reduce communication disruptions, such as cutting of cables due to debris removal, construction phases of the response. So in this session, you'll learn about the initiative and ongoing efforts. So the theme of this session is to educate participants on the initiative and ongoing efforts. And we've got a great panel here today. We've got someone from the communication sector and from the electric sector. And I'm doing this in alphabetical order. So Wally, don't take any offense. It's strictly alphabetical, okay? First up, we'll have Rodney Cooper, who is with T-Mobile. And then we'll have Wally Amelia, who's with the Edison Electric Institute. So Rodney, why don't you tell us a little bit about your responsibilities, what your day job is, and what your storm job is. Rodney?
Well, thank you, thank you, Greg, and thank you all for just inviting me to participate in this. It's coordination across industry and with our government partners is one of the things that's been near and dear to my heart. Just a little history of myself. I got into the communications industry right at 20 years ago. Fell into emergency management and serving our public safety community. Like many of those that are in the emergency management field, just trial by fire. I was kind of thrown into an incident, and that was in 2007. And since then, have been living and breathing ways to really kind of enable, how industry segments work together. Particularly communications and our partners in the utility sector and other elements within the critical lifelines. And then, of course, within government so that we can, better enable our communities to be resilient and how T-Mobile today will serve our communities moving forward. So a little bit of, background on how I've been involved. Initially, I got involved in some of this work with the NIST Business Advisory Council. I've done some work on a number of technology task force to enable information sharing across government and industry. And then, of course, part of this cross-sector resiliency forum to improve the best practices that, the things that we were trying to accomplish here in terms of coordination across the different sectors. So I'll pause there and turn it back over to you.
Thanks. And Wally, what about from your perspective? What's your title and what's your day job and what's your storm job?
Thanks, Greg. I'm Wally Amelia. I'm the Director of Preparedness and Recovery Policy at Edison Electric Institute. EEI is the trade association that represents the investor-owned electric company segment of the electric subsector. In my role, I help coordinate our mutual assistance and emergency response activities among our members. I also work on some of our spare transformer and spare equipment activities. And then, that the day job is also the storm job. So, and when I say storm, we actually are take an all hazards approach. I primarily work on storms and natural hazards. That's pretty common cause of damage to electric infrastructure. But EEI and our department as a whole has also responsibility for supporting members in physical security, cybersecurity, and we really do try to take an all hazards threat at EEI.
All right, thank you, Wally. Appreciate that. Just real quick to educate everyone, the objective of this overall forum is to identify opportunities needed to enhance communication and coordination between the communication and electric sectors before, during, and after a disaster. And we have a huge, we call it a working group that works together. I'm going to share my screen. You can see this is Tom. Can you let me share my screen, please? Thank you. So this is the list of people that have been participating in the working group over the past couple of years since it was initiated in 2020. And you can see here you've got representatives both from the communications sector, from the electric sector, and then also from the communication associations and the electric association. So a big group of people that have been working together. So first up, Wally, if you would, could you kind of give us a little bit of a history on the formation of this cross-sector resiliency forum and how it was established?
Sure. So as Greg alluded to in the introduction, there have been increasing weather hazards and challenges to all types of critical infrastructure. And while electric companies, electric utilities and communications companies have always worked together closely, keep in mind, we're each other's customers. We can't do our job without communications. Communications can't do their job without power. So we've always tried to work closely together, but given the sort of increasing nature of the threats and frequency of weather hazards coming out of Hurricane Michael, the Wireless Association, CTIA, approached Edison Electric Institute to think about how can we work on better coordination and communication between our members across the sectors. Since then, the Cross-Sector Resiliency Forum has actually grown to include really all aspects of both the communication sector and the electric sector. So we have at the association level brought in NCTA, who represents cable companies, US Telecom, which represents traditional wireline companies and broadband companies, ACA Connects, which is smaller independent communications companies, as well as the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association and the American Public Power Association, and all of these organizations members that want to participate. So we really are trying to take a broad approach to engage across both sectors as much as possible, and provide a forum, both a forum as a grouping, but also forums as actual meetings, which Greg showed some of the participants earlier, that have been able to sit down. We've done it over the past 2 years, both spring and fall, sort of before the traditional summer storm season, hurricanes and the like, if you like, and then sort of after the storm season in October, November, prior to what's traditionally been sort of wildfire season, although wildfire season now spans almost all the months because of climate change and the drought conditions in a number of states. But by doing that sort of cadence, we can sort of do it, before and then after each season, if you like, to share ideas. We'll go through some of the initiatives that have been uncovered, but also to learn from immediate past experiences. We've been lucky or unlucky in that we've had a lot of good experience. That means bad experience in some ways. Over the past couple of years with significant storms, derechos, ice storms, hurricanes, and not the least of which a global pandemic that has made everyone's lives just a little bit more complicated since we started this in 2019. So Greg, that's sort of that's the nickel tour of the history.
I was wanting the dime tour, but I guess I'll have to settle for the nickel tour. I appreciate that, Wally. Wally, Rodney, from your perspective, kind of give us kind of the overview and what you have seen as the benefits of the forums that have been conducted to date. And then Wally, I'll come back and get your perspective on that too.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I think, Wally, I know it's a little bit of a struggle to call anything a season anymore because I think, the season starts on January 1st and it ends on December 31st anymore. I really don't know that there is a season anymore because, we just saw, some pretty significant tornado outbreak in Kentucky and Tennessee and, the central states, in December, right? The other thing is we're not just facing natural threat, we're also facing man-made threat. December a year ago, an explosion occurred in Nashville and it had the same effect as a natural event did, and it took out both power and telecommunications infrastructure. So the point being is, unfortunately, there is no season anymore. And that's really where the value of this forum comes into play, because really what this forum is doing for us is, one, it's even though we've worked together before, and Raleigh, you mentioned it, we're customers of each other, right? And we've all worked together before, but it's probably putting a little bit more of a foundation underneath that working together, right? Not just, a company to another company, but industry to industry. And it doesn't just include telecommunications, and it doesn't just include utilities. Eventually some of this pulls in government into the discussion too as well. And so really the benefit, I think, to answer your question, Greg, is it's really about putting a foundation, establishing some best practices that not only we take from lessons learned, right? Unfortunately, you have to fail before you learn. And so those bad times turn into good times. And we're able to really apply that and share that across our industries, not just one-on-one, but in this whole forum, this whole collaboration of industry experts, stakeholders from all over our communities, and really just knit together a much tighter relationship across those industry segments. And at the end of the day, yes, we are developing some product like the best practices document and some other things. And hopefully the next phase will take that and turn it into practice. And so I'll pause there, sir, but I think for me, that's really what this is all about. We're able to really come together as an industry and represent our communities in ways that we haven't been able to do so in the past.
Great, thank you. Wally, what about from your perspective? What do you see as the kind of the benefits of the forums that have been conducted today?
Well, one thing I think that is particularly helpful is that we've got a fairly broad range of companies and entities from across the country. While the focus is, sort of initially on the hurricane zone, so the Gulf up the East Coast, and wildfires on the West Coast, the involvement has, been good with those companies, but also, last year, Alliant Energy in Iowa faced a huge derecho, and they actually, because of the forum, helped reach out to some communications companies who had lost service because their infrastructure was damaged too, let alone from the loss of power. And it's that ability to bring sort of a range of folks together to talk about, and then ultimately, as Rodney said, hopefully implement good, successful practices on how to coordinate. We really see this as a learning opportunity and a continual opportunity to improve. I'll say one thing about all of, I think, certainly the electric and communication sector, but really all critical infrastructure sectors, is we strive to do our best during the worst times, because we understand intimately that our customers, or our members' customers, in my case, I'm not going to climb a pole and turn a line, but the importance of our products and services, and they're even more important now, and only getting more important. So because we're interdependent, any opportunity to share with our peers and our partners becomes extremely valuable. And from our perspective, I think our members appreciate the opportunity to interact in different ways and learn from different regions too. I think that's a real plus of having a fairly broad group of organizations that are involved.
Great, thank you, Wally.
Yeah,
Rodney?
and Greg, if you don't mind, I'll just, and Wally, I'll raise my hand and say, look, here at T-Mobile, we've leaned into the forum a couple times ourselves, right? And, situations arise that, you mentioned all hazards, and one of the key tenets of all hazards is, you have to realize that anything can happen, but you really can't put doctrine around every single potential scenario, right? And so things arise that unfortunately you just didn't think about. And so there's been a couple instances here at T-Mobile where we've leaned into the forum ourselves, me particularly, to really look at, some very unique scenarios during an event and really come up with some creative ways to solve some problems that address both, not just the sectors, but again, our communities and our government partners as well.
That's a great point. The old axiom is, you want to exchange business cards on a blue sky day, right? Not when it's gray or black. And opportunities like this, and there's lots of other ones. Companies engage in a variety of forums, but this one was set up to help establish some of those relationships. And emergency response is a team sport, and you need all of the players, hopefully, to have some some knowledge of your partner's equities and needs, but also just knowing people is extremely important. To be able to get on the phone and call someone because you've had some interactions makes it easier to solve problems when the chips are really down.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right, we're going to do a quick poll. Tom Moran, I think we have 3 questions we want to poll the audience or the participants on. First off, what sector do you represent? Again, just a single choice: federal government, state or regional government, private sector, academic research, trade association, consulting, and I hope there's not many others, but anyway, if you could please vote real quick and kind of see what the type of representation we have on the section today. We'll give about another 10 seconds and then we'll kind of move on, see the results. Tom? All righty, we've got 2 of the 39 are government, federal government, 6 state government, 7 local regional government. We've got 13 from the private sector, 1 from the academic research, 3 from trade associations, 4 from consulting, and 3 from others. So yeah, pretty good cross sector of participants today. All right, let's go to the next question. Survey says.
Hang on, Greg. There we go. I'm new to polling.
Yeah, Laura's the expert there. How long have you been working in this field? How long have you been working in this field? Under a year, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, 20 to 30s, or over 30 years? I doubt there's anybody over 30 years, but anyway. So again, how long have you been working in this field? Should be your field. Single choice, all right? We've got nobody under a year. Okay, some 12 of the 42 that responded are 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 5, 11 to 29, another 10 from 20 to 30. Oh, and we do have 6 people that are over 30 years. So we've got some pretty darn good experience here. That's great news. All right, Tom, and the last question for the poll. In what region do you live? Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, Midwest, West, Hawaii, Alaska, or other U.S. territories? I don't know what other is, but are other. Help me with other there, Tom.
Not sure what other is. Maybe Brooklyn.
Or New Orleans, man. Might be New Orleans.
Or New Orleans, right, with all due respect. Right?
All right, let's see what we got. Okay, we got 14. The majority are from the Northeast. Then we got 8 from the Southeast, 3 from the Southwest, 6 from the Midwest, 8 from the West. And we've got 5 people from Hawaii, Alaska, or other U.S. territories. And good, we don't have anybody with others. So good, thanks for everybody participating on that. That was good information. All right, let's continue with our panel here. If we could, let's see, we picked on Rodney first last time, so let's pick on Wally. Wally, could you kind of educate participants on the makeup of the forum participants and how many forums have been conducted and the benefits been realized?
Sure.
How many forums we've had?
So we've had 4 virtual meetings of the forum, and with 40, 50 entities comprised of electric companies, members from the electricity trade associations, and then really the whole gamut of communications companies, be it wireless, wireline, cable, and I guess that's it, broadband, sort of all of the above. And the participants have been primarily operationally driven. I mean, it's kind of a mix of some policy-oriented folks, but also operational folks like Rodney, who are in sort of the emergency management or business continuity. From the electric company side, we'll have some of the managers and directors of emergency response or operations. And, you know, the goal is to help try to, you know, we're not a standards organization. We're not going to create, you know, rules and regulations or, you know, anything mandatory. You know, as a trade association, we don't do that at EEI. But the idea is to bring together people to share successful and good practices, and then build out from that, be it from immediately prior incidents, but also, you know, longer term things. So, you know, an example of, you know, fiber cuts are always a challenge during a big incident, but I think through the forum we've learned and shared that, you know, there are other entities that are often doing that, not necessarily electric utilities, but, you know, when you have really significant amount of damage, debris removal and access becomes very critical, but that can also impact telecommunications infrastructure. Less so electric infrastructure, because that is often, people know not to touch it, but, you know, unfortunately, all black fiber optic cable kind of looks the same, and it's easy to cut because it won't electrocute you, thank goodness. But unfortunately, it's easy to cut because it won't electrocute you. So we have, you know, some built-in reluctance from folks other than utilities to address, obviously, down power lines. And that being said, for any safety professionals out there, I want to encourage everyone, do not touch any wires on the ground, regardless of what they look like, because they could be dangerous. But, you know, so that's sort of a learning that we're able to share, to think about, okay, then how do we address that challenge? You know, our companies certainly try to be very cognizant and with their own crews and their contractors, but, you know, can we do outreach to state and local governments that often are in charge of debris removal and road access, and help educate them about the importance of trying to be cautious and careful of the communications infrastructure that might be down on the ground, but then still working, or even worse, you know, partially repaired and then someone cuts it again. So that's sort of a combination of an operational issue, but it's also a policy issue, because we have to communicate out to other stakeholders and other entities that are involved in emergency response.
All right, do you have anything you want to add to that, or are we going to go talk about the initiatives?
You know, I think something that's, you know, we've talked about this a number of times in the forum, and I don't know, Greg, if we'll get to this maybe as we go through the discussion further, but you know, there's a lot that occurs between the industry sectors themselves, the communications and the utility side of the house. And there's a lot that we can do that we are doing, and we can continue to do to improve how we do things on our own and how we do things together. But a common theme comes up is, you know, we can put all the best practices in place, and there's still a third party that needs to be included, which is our partners in government. And Wally, you were just kind of touching on it a little bit. And that is, you know, the simple fact of there are things that are in the control of government, i.e. access, reentry, the decisions on the priorities around reentry, which was, one of the challenges that we actually faced in after Hurricane Michael. And so, just kind of build on that a little bit more. Maybe we just discuss it as we go, Greg, but, really what we're trying to accomplish and what we're doing a pretty good job of accomplishing is creating or fostering, a trusted environment, right? Which is kind of key, because if you look at, different jurisdictional policies, you look at some state legislation, you look at some of the federal policies, it's not always easy, to be part of, kind of be a trusted agent within each other's operations, much less within government operations. So really one of the things that we're starting to break ground on is really trying to foster that trusted environment where we can almost all be appendages or extensions, if you will, of our own operations. And so at the end of the day, some of the things that do come up, we're able to address that immediately, sooner rather than later. But again, maybe we'll circle back to that discussion a little bit.
Thank you there, Rodney. Let's kind of share with the participants. I see we got 2 questions. We'll get to the questions at the end of the session, but we'll kind of share our famous rainbow chart, and maybe you guys can kind of talk just a little bit briefly about each one. If you want to just alternate or how you want to do this, but maybe tell us a little bit about each of the initiatives and what's going on. Wally, I'll start with you.
Sure. So, when we started with the forum and in particular the working group of companies and utilities that are involved, we tried to look at the gamut of emergency response. And obviously, there's a left of boom, a boom, and a right of boom, and trying to think about what are some things we can do, all with the goal of, again, fostering communication and coordination between the sectors. So on the sort of the planning phase, trying to identify ways to share information and help before incidents, be it exercises, workshops, state or regional forums. So we've tried to collect those, and we've got sort of a living, breathing set of documents that forum participants can access to find out where these might be happening and if there are cross-sector opportunities from each segment. Unfortunately, we started this just as COVID was blowing up, so we probably didn't have as many, in-person exercises and workshops and summits, etc. Just because we've all sort of been stuck in our home offices for a while. But, going forward, we think that that's a really valuable and important way to share information. At EEI and on the energy side, we invite communication companies to some of the exercises we do. Some of our members do that. We've invited communication sectors to broader industry exercises like GridX to help understand how the industry responds at the very highest levels. And all of these, I think, continue to foster that sharing of information before something bad happens, so you have good partners. Greg, do you want me to run through the rest of them, or?
Let me get off mute. Rodney, you want to talk about anyone that's near and dear to your heart that you want to share with the team? A couple that are near and dear to your heart?
I think, yeah, maybe just a couple things there. And I don't know, Wally, you were just kind of talking about the origination and the exercise component. There's one of the common topics has been, how do we identify each other's critical infrastructure? So one of the work streams has been, how do we better coordinate, share information between the sectors regarding which, because here's one of the things that you face is that, in an event, everything becomes a priority. Well, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? And so, one of the challenges that you have to, we at T-Mobile, and I would argue to say that, not, across the utility sector, but as well as the telecommunications sector, is that there are certain things that do take priority. So identifying those priority areas within our own infrastructure and labeling that and making sure that our partners on the other side of the table know what they are as well. So that when we are facing those things, those chips are down, to use Wally's words, we're able to more proactively look at that and figure out, okay, if that's a critical utility site, let's call it a transfer station, and if we have telecommunications infrastructure that is supporting that transfer station, then me, T-Mobile, wants to make sure that I put that in my priorities in terms of restoring restoring our telecommunications infrastructure. And then likewise, right, if I have critical sites like mobile switching offices and things like that, we want to make sure that our partners on the utility side know that those are the most important, because quite frankly, I can have all the cell sites in the world up, but without a mobile switching office, well, doesn't really help a lot, right? So the point there is, the identification of critical infrastructure before an event, and then there's been some good work on how do we identify certain elements of the infrastructure. Wally, you mentioned wires down, right? And how do we identify things? How do we label things so that when crews are in there, whether debris removal crews or utility crews or whatever the case may be, road clearing crews that are doing cut and throws, that they can see that, hey, leave that alone, right? So, and that's post-event stuff, right? So the critical infrastructure identification part, that's pretty much what that's about. The local contact information, we always talk about this federated effort, but we all know that the best way to manage things is at the most local level, right? So really establishing, a good framework of who is the most local person that I need to work with to solve the most local issues, right? Because the better we do that, the faster, sooner, better the things get restored. And then lastly, I kind of touched on it a little bit, and that is, the government coordination, which is a work stream that we're going into now. And that is, how do we, broaden this relationship across the sectors to include government. Quite frankly, the practice in the past has been, a leaning into government to pull us in. Well, I think our approach is, hey, let's us as industry segments go the other direction and pull government in. And so that'll be, maybe one of the outcomes of the government EOC staffing and coordination work stream.
Great. Wally, could you educate the participants on the forecasted area for PSPS and maybe a little bit about the company EOC staffing coordination?
Sure. So and this is actually right in the same vein of what Rodney was just talking about trying to drive things down to the local level. On PSPS events, which if you're not in the West, that's a public safety power shutoff, which has been implemented in California, where in the most dangerous fire situations, utilities may proactively shut down a segment of the grid to prevent fires from igniting when there's very high winds and red flag warnings and the like. They don't like doing that. Electric companies are not in the business of turning power off, but because the fire risk in those limited circumstances is so high, it's something that's done for public safety. So a lot of work has been done by companies and utilities in California with the California PUC. I don't want to claim credit for the forum for this, but we want to continue to share it with our members. But the companies there have made great progress in getting very detailed information out of their systems. They've greatly expanded their weather monitoring, and they've really expanded the outreach with other critical or public safety customers in their service territories, so that if they have to do a PSPS, they can give companies like Rodney's or or water company or other hospitals, et cetera, some advance warning with some specificity on regions. And it's got to be fast moving. So 3 of the investor-owned utilities in California have set up online portals that critical customers can be given access to, so they can get really detailed information. So, you know, that's kind of a unique circumstance for California because of the really extreme threat of fires there. But it's a good example of how companies in both sectors and really across sectors came together to ensure there was good information sharing. And one of the most critical things from our perspective is how can we continue to get good information sharing at in particular government EOCs, because you know everybody has a plan, but you know that goes out the window when you get punched in the face, according to Mike Tyson. So every electric company, every communication company spends a lot of time planning how are we going to respond to an emergency, but then when boom happens, you know, you have to be flexible and the plans may change. So, and many of those decisions are made by state or local officials for public safety reasons, because of the changing or the evolving nature of whatever the threat may be. So having good entree and good information sharing at EOCs, government runs ones is really important, as Rodney alluded to. And then there's a lot of ways that companies can share information between and with each other through their own company EOCs. Now, a lot of companies, because of the way the EOCs are situated, they may be in secure locations, may not, you know, be able to bring people in, but, you know, hey, we can do things virtually now, right? So there's opportunities to have calls or meetings, you know, online to make sure that the information is being shared. And there's a number of successful practices have been identified, be it, you know, standing calls, working with other entities, be it government or FEMA or DHS, to participate in ongoing, I'll call them calls, you know, I mean, everything's a virtual call now, to share that information during the response phase. So people have good information and know how to adjust their own plans. And this is all sort of being captured in what we're calling a cross-sector operational coordination and communication document, where some of these practices are being identified and will hopefully continue to be identified so that we can share ideas from different regions, different companies. You know, folks may already have good practices that work. We want to build on those. We're not looking to replace things. We're looking to stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say.
Gotcha. Appreciate that, Wally. Rodney, anything you want to add to that from a cross-sector operational coordination, and then maybe cover a little bit about the priority restoration information?
Yeah, I think, you know, the cross-sector operational coordination, quite frankly, that's about the time that I kind of stepped into this forum, and it really is kind of the baseline of you know what we've been trying to accomplish and setting forth some best practices, right? Things that not only at the industry level or just the people that are part of the forum, you know, it's not about establishing doctrine, to Wally's point. You can almost look at it like a NIMS guidance for utilities and the telecommunications, right? It's a guidance, it's a framework of best practices that we can share with our partners, right? Whether they're engaged in the forum or not. And that's really kind of, quite frankly, that's really kind of what the desire of this is, right? And so, so really the cross-sector operational coordination piece is really just setting some best practices, a framework of best practices, outlining those, and they all come from, and we've said it so far a couple times in the discussion so far, they all really come from lessons learned, right? The things that we've all learned from through any number of events You know, and I've been doing this for 20 years, so I can say for 20 years. So that's really, you know, my view of how the cross-sector operational coordination component is kind of, you know, I think we're kind of at the end of that and moving into the government EOC coordination element. But it really is not just about how do we coordinate during an event. It's a lot of time spent on how do we coordinate between events. And you really can't say before events because there never seems to be a before anymore. So I will say between events. And then lastly, priority restoration information. And I kind of touched on it a little bit, which was the critical infrastructure identification. But that is, you know, that is really the practice of saying, hey, here are some priority areas that we, you know, whether it's a company, whether it's the industry, that we become aware of during an incident or after an incident, that, you know, is a priority based on a number of factors. Some of it we'll kind of identify based on our own way of doing things, you know, for us, and much like our partners in communications and our utilities, public safety is almost entirely always first. Anything that's life safety impacting hospitals, public safety operations, whatever the case may be. And then you just kind of flow down from there into, you know, the best impact. And I'm not going to list them all out, but those are the things that we have in our own doctrine. And we are talking about how do they align and then how can we operationalize that. But it also includes the gathering of information, because sometimes our partners in government who have their fingers on the pulse of public safety, life safety, where are the needs the most, right? Because where we may think, hey, there's a community over here that's important, we may not know that they evacuated that community and it's no longer really the priority. Where the priority is where they evacuated to. And so, so priority restoration is, yes, restoring of our own infrastructure, but also aligning that with the needs and the priorities of what's happening in our communities.
Great, thank you for that. And Wally, if you could just quickly just give kind of just an overview of the road clearing coordination and wires down communication initiatives.
Sure. So road clearing is by and large in the purview of localities or states. We've basically tried to document some ideas on how participants in the forum or electric and communications companies can try to coordinate through EOCs to find out where those clearing opportunities or clearing actions are occurring. And you know, that's another example of the criticality of trying to be at that table in EOCs. So we as infrastructure owners and operators can be aware of where those priorities are. And you know, it's vital because you know you have to clear and open roads for public safety, but also before we can restore service in many cases. That came out in spades in Ida, where companies were waiting to get in, but because of the magnitude of debris, sometimes they would be delayed. Then on wires down communication, that was one where the working group will begin to examine. We haven't solved the problem there, but I think some of the things such as critical infrastructure identification, thinking about, okay, where are priorities, some of which can be done before an event, then ultimately helps with things like wires down communication, because if you've coordinated beforehand, you have a better idea of, okay, we know this, you know, street is going to be perhaps more important than a different street because we've already talked about that. So that will be explored some more, you know, depending on the type of incident. It can be really challenging if there's a lot of wires down. But it gives us an opportunity to try to get better at it.
All right, sounds great. Well, we do have a couple of questions. Unfortunately, though, we've only got 2 minutes left. So we're gonna just try to address those questions offline. The one question talks about the recent Tonga volcano case of severing the only communication trunk line to the island, where the communications and utility organizations do to mitigate this same potential within the U.S. to include remote Alaska communities, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, i.e. the 2017 hurricane. And then we've got another, well, I guess it's kind of an offer, and this one's for Tom, talking about conducting a exercise for the consortium. So we'll follow up with that at a later date. So with that, Laura, I'm gonna put it back to you. But one thing before I do close, just want to say that we call this document successful practices. It's not best practice, but successful practices that we're putting together that talks about all these initiatives and successful practice for exercises, workshops, summits, so on and so forth. With that, Laura, I'll pass it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you, Wally and Rodney. That was a fantastic panel, and I know we have continuing work ahead, so I bet we'll have you back next year.